Hello, and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a variety of things to talk about, including a few signings, some injury updates, and some trade rumors involving the Washington Capitals, Buffalo Sabres. Get to all of that coming up right now. Hello, and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. I'd like to kick things off today with a few signings today. Both of the signings are goalies. So I'd like to start off with the Chicago Blackhawks, as they signed Dylan Wells to a one-year contract that will have an AAV of $750,000. Now, the Blackhawks had a little bit of injury troubles, with Mrazek and Stalock both being out due to injuries. They only had Arvid Soderblom on an NHL contract, so they needed another goalie who could play at the NHL level, at least for the short term, and Dylan Wells can be that. He has had a rough start in the AHL to start the season, putting up only a 4.62 goals against average and an 862 save percentage, so not too good. But he was able to come in and back up for the time being due to Peter Mrazek and Alex Stalock both being injured. So Wells was able to do okay. He actually even got into one NHL game, giving up 3 goals and having a 923 save percentage, which is pretty good given the fact the Blackhawks are a rebuilding team. But definitely, Wells is just probably going to be their fourth stringer for now. If they run into enough injuries, he'll probably get called up again. But he has since been moved down with the Mrazek coming back. So it was just a depth move for the Blackhawks, but definitely it gives them a little bit more depth to the goaltending position. And if the injuries start to pile up again and they run into a lot of injuries, at least they have another goalie who can be called upon if they need to be. And the next signing also involves the goaltender, as the Maple Leafs ran into a little bit of injury trouble over the weekend when they lost Ilya Samsonov due to injury. So with all of their goalies injured, and Murray and now Samsonov and Joseph Woll, they needed another goaltender who could back up Eric Källgren. So they were able to go out and sign Keith Pietruzzelli to a 2-year entry-level contract with an AAV of $818,000. Now, he had been playing with their AHL affiliates in Toronto and had been doing pretty well, putting up a 2.31 goals against average and a 922 save percentage in 6 AHL games. So he had done pretty well for the Maple Leafs. He had definitely not done too bad, but I definitely think that he probably won't get into very much NHL action, if any at all. Källgren's the starter for the time being, and it does sound like Matt Murray will be returning in the near future. So Pietruzzelli will probably just be the backup for Källgren for the time being until Murray gets back, and when Murray gets back, he'll be moved back down to the minors. But they definitely needed another goaltender, and Pietruzzelli does seem like he might have some NHL potential, maybe in the future as an NHL backup, but for the time being, he's their 5th-string goaltender, and once the Leafs get a little bit more healthier, he'll definitely move down the depth charts. But if they run into more injuries like this, at least they have Pietruzzelli there to be an insurance marker in case they ever run into this many injuries again. Now, that's all the signings we want to talk about. Next one, I want to jump over to some injury updates. Over in Edmonton, the Oilers lost Evander Kane due to a wrist injury. Really bad injury. It was in a game against the Tampa Bay Lightning a few days ago, and he got hit. He fell down on the ice and got his wrist cut by a skate blade, which was really, really bad. Bad injury for Evander Kane, and he's now going to miss 3 to 4 months due to a wrist injury. So, really bad for Kane, and definitely a key piece to the Oilers' top 6. They're definitely going to miss him, and replacing his production is going to be extremely hard. But this might be a bit of a blessing in disguise. The Oilers have been running with a 21-man roster due to their tight cap, but with Kane now being out 3 or 4 months, they now putting him on long-term injury reserve, they're able to now run with a 23-man roster and have a little bit more cap flexibility because of it. So they do lose a key piece to their top 6 in Evander Kane, and losing him for a extended period of time is going to hurt them for sure. But being able to get a little bit more cap space to allow a few more call-ups if they run into more injuries is really good for them. So definitely going to miss Kane, key top 6 piece, and I definitely doubt that they'll be able to replace his production, but it does give them a little bit more of cap flexibility. Over in Chicago, the Blackhawks, as we talked about, had a little bit of goaltending injuries due to Stalock and Mrazek, who were their NHL tandem this year. Now, they have since placed Alex Stalock, who was in concussion protocol, into the net about a week ago and suffered a concussion and had been just an unhealthy scratch, but he's now been placed on injury reserve and will miss the next little while. But on the positive side, Peter Mrazek, who was injured and did miss a little bit of time and was on IR, has now been activated, and he should be able to play with the Chicago Blackhawks right away. So getting Mrazek back is going to be good. They'll be able to bump Dylan Wells back to the minor leagues, where he can probably continue to play a decent enough AHL game. And it should bump Soderblom from starter to backup for the time being. And once Stalock is back and being able to back up for the Chicago Blackhawks, we'll be able to move Soderblom back to the minors. But definitely I think that Mrazek being back for the Blackhawks is huge. He can be a good goaltender at times, but he has definitely dealt with his fair share of injuries in Carolina and especially last year in Toronto. But if he can stay healthy, then the Blackhawks should always be given a chance to win. And I think that for the time being, they'll probably have Mrazek and Soderblom until Stalock is back. So getting Mrazek back is huge, but the loss of Stalock is pretty bad for them. As for the Montreal Canadiens, they have been dealing with a lot of injuries over the past few seasons. Last year, they dealt with a whole bunch of injuries, which I think is a big reason why they end up finishing last in the NHL. But this year, they also started with a couple of bad injuries. Carey Price is on long-term injury reserve, so is Paul Byron. We don't know the future of when they can return or if they ever will return. But they were able to get Joel Edmundson, who started the season on injury reserve and missed a big portion of last year due to injuries and personal reasons. And they were able to get him back. They activated him off of IR, and he's played a few games now. Getting a big top four piece like that back in their lineup is huge. The Canadiens have started off well. I'm not sure if they can sustain this good of a play throughout the course of the season because they are still a younger team. But getting a more veteran type of defenseman back to work with their more younger blue line is pretty good. I think Edmundson can be paired with a guy like Jordan Harris or Arbor Xhekaj to help them grow their game. And I think Edmundson is going to be a key piece to return to this Montreal blue line, as he has proven he is definitely a good leader on this team and is definitely a really good top four defenseman. And on top of that, they did place Evgeny Dodonov at injury reserve a week and a half ago, and he's now back. So getting Dodonov back is pretty good. He has not played up to his potential. He's not the top goal scorer guy that he was in Florida, and he's still looking for his first point as a Montreal Canadien. But definitely I do think that he should be able to help the offense at least a little bit. He's still a top 9 forward in my opinion, but he still needs to play like a top 9 forward. I know there were flashes in Vegas, and he still played like a top 9 forward in Ottawa, but he is a little bit overpriced at $5 million for a top 9 forward. So I do think that Montreal getting Dodonov and Edmundson back is good. They are finally starting to get healthier, and hopefully they can continue to get healthier as the season goes on. As for the Colorado Avalanche, they have run into some injury trouble. Valeri Nichushkin, who suffered an injury and was an unhealthy scratch over the past few games, has now been placed on IR and will miss the next few weeks due to an injury. Nichushkin is a big part of the Avalanche's top six, playing a lot of key minutes for the Avalanche, and definitely seems like he will be a big piece for the Avalanche, especially with the losses of guys like Burakovsky and Kadri in the offseason. So losing Nichushkin is going to be hard on the Avalanche. They're going to have to call upon some of their more middle six forwards like Alex Newhook, Evan Rodriguez, Martin Kaut to try and step up and help replace the production that Nichushkin was having, because Nichushkin was having a pretty good season up until this point with his injury. But I definitely think that the Avs have the pieces to recover and play well enough without Nichushkin that they can still be a really good NHL team, and I think that they should be able to weather the storm until Nichushkin is back. Also, on top of that, the Avalanche also have a few defensemen injured. They have Bowen Byram on the blue line, out week to week with an injury, and Samuel Girard out day to day with an injury. Neither of those two have been placed on injury reserve, at least yet, but they're both out with an injury. So definitely think that the Avs are a bit banged up right now, and hopefully they can count on their younger players to step up and help them as they try and recover from injuries. Next, we have the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the Red Wings have had a little bit of injury trouble again. They've been a pretty injured team to start the season, and they get a few more bad injury updates. Filip Zadina, who left a game over the weekend against the Islanders due to an injury, is now going to miss 6 to 8 weeks due to that injury. So Zadina has been a pretty good middle six forward for the Red Wings. He hasn't been as productive as he probably could be, but he's been definitely a good addition to that middle six. So losing a guy like Zadina, especially when you still have Tyler Bertuzzi out, is horrible for the Red Wings, and I hope that they can recover. They have had a lot of forward injuries up to this point in the season. And speaking of forward injuries, another forward went down in the last few days, and that is Matt Luff. Luff went into the boards hard in a game against the Montreal Canadiens, and will now miss 10 to 12 weeks with a wrist injury. So definitely the Red Wings are really injured right now. Luff isn't the biggest of forwards, but he was a good depth piece. With some of the other injuries, he was sort of carving himself out a role as a fourth line forward for the time being. But now with him being injured, you have Fabry injured, you have Bertuzzi injured, you have Zadina injured, you have Luff injured, you have Wallman and Pysyk injured on the back end. Virana is also out right now, so there's a lot of injuries on this Detroit team. So they're going to have to count on their depths to get them through this time for now. It does sound like Oscar Sundqvist, who is also dealing with an injury, as well as Tyler Bertuzzi and Jake Wallman are all going to be back in the near future, within the next maybe week or two. So that is really good news for the Red Wings, who are definitely dealing with a lot of injuries right now. So hopefully these guys can come back in and help this team continue to be a pretty good team as they have shown over the start of the season. But definitely the losses of Zadina and Luff are going to hurt this Red Wings team, as they're going to try and use their depth to help them overcome these injuries. And lastly here, I'm going to talk on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Maple Leafs have had some good and bad news. They have been able to activate Timothy Liljegren off of long-term injury reserve over the weekend, and he's now gone into a few games and put up a few points, a couple goals. So he's definitely looked like a good, solid top four defenseman, and he seems like he could be the missing piece from the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs were a bit shaky to start on the blue line, but Liljegren seems to have helped the Leafs start shutting down opposing offenses. I mean, they beat the Bruins and Canes over the weekend, so obviously Liljegren is definitely starting to help. He's definitely growing into a really valuable top four defenseman for the Maple Leafs, and I think that he should continue to grow as a good NHL player for the Maple Leafs, and getting him back in the lineup was huge. Another defenseman was also activated off of injury reserve, and that is Jordy Ben. He was an off-season acquisition. Now, he's not as big of a piece as Liljegren. He's probably going to be a 7th, 8th defenseman for the Maple Leafs, but he does give them a little bit more depth. If they end up running into any more injuries, he can probably go into a third pair, and even if not, even if they start to go on a slump and they need to shake up something, they can probably put Ben in on the third pair. So definitely a good value piece for the Toronto Maple Leafs, so they can get back now. And I think that getting Ben and Liljegren back definitely helps this defense. I know they still have Muzzin on injury reserve, but getting Ben and Liljegren back will help give this defense a little bit more depth, and will also help them play a little bit better, in my opinion. But as we talked about earlier, Ilya Samsonov went down with an injury over the weekend. So Samsonov is injured right now on the net. Murray is injured right now. So that's their tandem for this year. They brought in Samsonov and Murray to be their tandem. Now they're both out due to injuries. They also have AHL starter/backup Joseph Wall, who also seems like he could eventually make the NHL. He is also dealing with injuries right now. So definitely a lot of injuries for the Maple Leafs in net. But there's some good news, as Matt Murray could return in the near future. But losing Samsonov, who's going to be out for the next few weeks due to an injury, is horrible. I know that Samsonov has been playing really well as of late and had been doing fantastic, playing like an actual starting goaltender, as he has shown the Maple Leafs that he can be trusted as the new starting goaltender of the Maple Leafs. So losing Samsonov, who's been playing quite well to his start as a Maple Leaf, and keeping the Leafs in games that they probably didn't deserve to be in, was great. And losing him is going to be horrible for the Leafs. But hopefully Murray can get back soon, and then Samsonov can hopefully follow soon afterwards, and hopefully he makes a speedy recovery, and the injury doesn't impact his play too much, as he has been playing pretty well with the Maple Leafs. So that's all the injury news I want to talk about here today. Next, I want to talk about some trade rumors. I'm going to start with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, the Sabres currently have a few injuries on the blue line. They have missed Rasmus Dahlin has missed time due to injury. So has Ilya Liabushkin. Matthias Samuelsson and Henri Jokiharju are currently on injury reserve due to injuries. So their defense is pretty banged up right now, and I wouldn't be shocked if they went out to try and acquire a depth defenseman to some sorts. I think that the Sabres have a top four of the future in Power, Dahlin, Jokiharju, and Samuelsson, so they don't need a all-star type defenseman. They even have Ryan Johnson, who's playing in college right now, who could even come up as early as the end of this year and play with the Sabres on like a third pair or push to be a second pair defenseman. So the Sabres are set for top elite end defensemen for now. But I definitely think they could use another defenseman who could come in and help them survive some of these injuries right now. They do have a couple of good defensemen, and I think they can weather a storm, but I think adding another guy who can play on the third pair or even the top four right now and maybe be downgraded to like a third pair or a sixth or seventh defenseman later on in the season when they get Samuelsson and Jokiharju back might be a smart move for the Sabres. I think they could target a guy like Sean Walker in LA. He's a good top six right shot defenseman. He could probably play on the third pair right now, and then when they have a fully healthy lineup, probably go in and out with Ilya Liabushkin on the third pair. So I think Walker could definitely be a good piece for the Sabres. I don't think they're going after a hugely important guy. Like I said, they have a top four of the future, so they're pretty good right now. I don't think they're going to be moving first-round picks and stuff to try and acquire a defenseman, but if they could move like a third or fourth-round pick for a decent depth defenseman who can help them right now, I think they would definitely do that, and I think they could move like a third-round pick for Walker, so they could use Walker in their top six for now, and maybe even when they get healthy again. A couple of other teams who I would probably look at would be Arizona and Boston. The Arizona Coyotes have a few good right-shot defensemen on short-term deals in Troy Stecher and Joshua Brown, who I don't think would take too much to get out of Arizona. I think they would only be worth a mid to late round pick, probably a third, fourth round pick for Brown or Stecher, and they're both on short-term deals. I think Brown signed a 2-year deal and Stecher only on a 1-year deal. So acquiring one of those two guys could definitely help. Brown could be more of a seventh defenseman for the team, whereas Stecher, just like Walker, could probably switch in and out with Ilya Liabushkin on that third pair. But definitely I think Arizona could be another target for the Sabres to acquire a more depth defenseman. And even Boston Bruins. The Bruins could be getting Charlie McAvoy back in the next couple days or weeks, and they might need to make a cost-cutting move. So getting rid of a guy like maybe Mike Riley, who is more of a left-side defenseman, but could also play third pair minutes for the Sabres. He could even play top 4 minutes right now, and then probably be a seventh defenseman once the Sabres are healthy. That could be another option for the Sabres. And even not Riley, then maybe Connor Clifton. He signed for 1 year at $1 million and has had an amazing start to this season with the Bruins with their injuries on defense and has put up some pretty nice point totals. So maybe Clifton could be another option. But I definitely think that the Sabres, with all of their injuries right now, could definitely use another defenseman to help weather the storm until Samuelsson and or Jokiharju are back. So I would not be shocked if the Sabres went out and got another defenseman and tried to help this team right now get through the tough time with Samuelsson and Jokiharju on injury reserve. And lastly here, I'm going to talk on the Washington Capitals. Now, Capitals have recently been interested in trying to acquire a forward. Now, this doesn't come as really much of a surprise. They have currently Nicholas Backstrom, who's probably going to be out the entire season due to injury. Connor Brown's going to be out the entire season due to injury. Tom Wilson has not played at all this season and will probably be out still for another month. Beck Malmstein will miss the next probably month and a half due to injury. And TJ Oshie is going to be out longer term due to injury. So the Caps have a really banged up forward group right now, and they've done quite well. They're sitting around the 500 mark so far this year. So if they were to make any sort of a playoff push, I think they would definitely need to acquire another forward to help their middle six, because it's really a weak point on this team right now. So there have been a lot of speculation that they are currently talking to the Montreal Canadiens about maybe acquiring a forward from Montreal. We know the Canadiens are trying to move a forward as they have a lot of forwards right now. And I think a guy like Dadonov or Drouin or Hoffman could even be of interest to the Washington Capitals. I think the Caps could definitely have interest in a guy like Dadonov or Drouin or Hoffman. So I definitely think that the Canadiens and Capitals could definitely be trade partners. I think that the Caps also have a lot of bottom six forwards on expiring deals. So even if they would acquire a guy with like a second year, I don't think it would be too hard for the Caps to try and fit him in as long as he's not too expensive. So like Hoffman signed for an extra year, but I do think there's some salary retention. I do think they would still be interested in Hoffman. So definitely think that Montreal and Washington could be trade partners, but I don't think that's the only team the Caps could end up making a trade with. They also have the Boston Bruins. As I said, the Bruins have McAvoy coming back soon, and they could need to make a cost-cutting move. And maybe a guy like Craig Smith or Nick Foligno could be of interest to the Washington Capitals. Smith has been a good third-line forward for the last few years in Boston, and has not been the top six forward he used to be, but he's still a really good third-line forward. And in the final year of his deal, I think it would be definitely attainable for the Capitals to take on his salary for just this year and try and see if he can help their offense. Nick Foligno was probably more of a fourth-line forward, but I think in the right system he could still be a decent third-line forward. So I wouldn't rule out him going to Washington and maybe helping that offense in the bottom six. But he's also in the final year of his deal, so acquiring a Smith or a Foligno would not be too hard for the Washington Capitals. I also think the San Jose Sharks could be another team who could be interested in moving it forward. I know that they've been willing to listen on basically anyone for the trade. Now, I don't think the Capitals will be willing to trade for like a Timo Meier or a Logan Couture or anything, but a depth piece like a Nick Bonino or a Matt Nieto or a Oscar Lindblom would probably be of interest to the Washington Capitals. I know Nieto's played quite well in a middle six role with the Sharks so far this year. Bonino's more of a center, but he can play wing. Lindblom could probably be a third-line winger for the Caps. So definitely I think that the Sharks have a few options for the Capitals who could end up being good acquisitions. And also the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks have had a pretty bad start this season and could start selling off pieces really soon if they can't turn the ship around. So a guy like Connor Garland could be on the move, but I don't think the Caps will be too interested in Garland with his long-term deal and cap hit. But a guy like maybe Tanner Pearson would be of interest. I do think that Pearson could be a good depth piece for the next 2 seasons for the Washington Capitals. So I definitely think that there are a few options for Washington, but if they are going to make a long playoff run for this year, they're going to have to acquire a forward to help with all these injuries. And I think that we could see a Washington Capitals acquire a forward in the near future. And that's all I'm going to talk about here. So remember to like this video and subscribe. Remember, I also do a blog post, which I'll leave in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next week's video. See you guys soon.